and then I'm from Corbin, which is the second last. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Everybody knows Corbin.
Yeah.
We don't know where the hell it's at, but everybody
Yeah.
knows Corbin.
Isn't that the center of the universe? That's what they call it?
Well, if you're from there, I
Of
suppose
course.
it is.
Yeah.
Resident of like 221.
They got people down there, and there's business down there. There's lots of business. It's a interesting place to grow up.
When you say interesting place to grow up,
Yeah.
explain that.
You know, I suppose it's a typical small town. Everybody knows each other. Everybody's family. And Northern Kentucky's like that in a lot of ways.
We just have a few more residents.
A few more residents. It's extremely conservative.
You didn't fit in.
I did not fit in. And I was anxious to get out, and I did.
Did you always feel that way? Like, were you anxious to get out or no? Like when you were like 15.
Yeah, I knew I was an outcast in particularly my way of thinking relative to my, peers, and even like my teachers in high school. I was thinking about politics and policy and how policy affected poor people, probably at a younger age than most people.
You had that thought, like policy. Did you have that term, like how policy affects poor people?
Probably not in that terminology. I probably didn't have the words to describe it.
But how did it feel at that time?
Yeah. How it felt. And, my parents, my mother's from Pittsburgh and my father was from Western Kentucky, and both grew up in liberal families.
Blue-collar, Democrat, liberal.
Blue-collar, yeah, what they used to call, solid South, blue-collar Democrat. And but they maintained that liberal perspective, I think, even as the world around them in Kentucky shifted to conservative politics.
What does that mean, that liberal mindset? What did that mean in the 1980s?
I mean, it's hard for me to say because I was a child in the Reagan era. I think, what it meant was having a solid safety net for people who fell through the cracks, right? If you lost your job, if interest rates went up to 20%, then you weren't left homeless. You weren't bankrupted by healthcare costs, which we're going to talk about today. Those sorts of things, I think, is that's what it meant to, working families, I think.
Does it still mean the same thing today?
I don't think so. I mean, from my perspective, the right has shifted to the right and the left has shifted to the left. And if you're a capitalist like me, but you still believe in a safety net for people who fall through the cracks, you're left
nowhere
without a home. That's my perspective. I think a lot of people feel that way, but the media around it is so hyperbolic. We don't have to go down that path, but I think it's tough for your average American who wants sensible policies to find a home. Yeah.
What happened with that? So that's not even saying the politics thing. That what happened shouldn't be politics. See what I'm saying? So we could talk about what happened and it not be talking politics. Like, how did this thing happen? What was it? What was the precursor? What was the, I don't know.
Yeah.
What would you, because I know you have thoughts about it.
I do, and I'm definitely not an expert, but it goes back to, I think the Reagan era is really what transitioned everything. Government is the problem. Government's not a solution for the problem. It is the problem. And, I think that was probably true at the time, but it changed the mindset of how we look at government and politics. This is my perspective.
I want to hear it.
As an amateur armchair.
Here is what, because I bet the majority of things that come out of your mouth, I'm not 100% going to agree with.
Sure.
But that's what we're missing.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
I think we agree on a lot. I think we probably
But I'm saying even what I disagree on, I'm okay hearing.
Oh, sure.
That's where
Absolutely.
That's a big issue
No,
right now.
We've had a lot of good
We have.
conversations, you and I, about you
Yeah.
know why things are the way they are and what's the right solution for it.
It's tough.
And I think the solutions is where we get bogged down. That's where you and I could disagree probably about it, and it's because it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard when you talk about these big policies, that affect a lot of people.
So when we get to, let me, it's weird, like an introduction a few minutes in, but I want to talk about the solutions. So thank you for joining us today.
Sure.
So Charlie Vance, you are the CEO of a company called Current HR.
That's right.
And you're a pretty much full entire, I guess is a way to describe it, bumper-to-bumper HR solution for companies.
That's right.
Is that good?
Full outsourced HR plus benefits, workers' compensation, the whole kit and caboodle for you if you're a business that you want to focus on growing your business and you don't want to have to worry about compliance with employment when compliance is becoming more and more difficult year over year in the employment area. So we manage all of that for you.
So
That's
also
a
you're
quick commercial. Sorry.
yeah, that's it. Also you're an attorney.
I'm an attorney.
So you went to Northern Kentucky University, Salmon.
Salmon P. Chase, yeah.
There you go. Okay. So was there, when you go through law school, do you specialize in that type of law when you're done? Do you know?
No, there's no specific tracks, but for me it was, corporate business transactional law when I was in law school. As far as like where I took my extracurricular classes when you got to choose.
So you find yourself, I believe, I don't know how often, but you find yourself testifying in the state capitol of Kentucky a lot.
Yeah.
In front of the legislature.
Yep.
About what?
So it's usually employment-related bills. I've been asked by our local chamber of commerce to come and testify on a bill that they're supporting, and then most recently the industry that I'm a part of, the National Association of PEOs. So PEO is the industry that my business is a part of, professional employer organization. We had a bill that we lobbied for and then eventually passed, but that took 4 years, and there was a cleanup bill, so there was testifying several times over that.
What was
4 year
what
course.
was that bill about?
So that bill was about regulating our industry. So we had a very slim statute that regulated PEOs in the state of Kentucky, and the industry pushed for a more comprehensive regulation that said, you have to have enough assets on your balance sheet to do business, and you have to register so we know who's out there being a PEO. And one of the reasons we wanted to do that was because we wanted to keep out bad actors, people who there have been some PEO operators who had essentially said, okay, I'm going to pay your health insurance premium for you and your workers' compensation premium for you. And then a year later, the businesses that were working with them found out it never got paid. So we wanted to address that.
Why 4 years for a bill?
It takes a long time to get to galvanize support. When we first went down there, I first started talking about a bill for it in probably 2012, and legislators didn't know what a PEO was, even though some big operators were operating in the state. And so it took a while to educate legislators, to convince them that this was something that needed to pass. And then the big part was, anytime you work on a legislation at state or federal level, there are influential parties, associations. In our case, we had to worry about a big one was the Plaintiffs Lawyers Association, what we call the Kentucky Justice Association in Kentucky. They had thoughts on our bill, and they had specific concerns around our bill. The Independent Insurers Association, or the Big I, they had concerns. So we really had to go to each of them and say, how can we address those concerns before we even went to legislators to say, hey, the Big I's okay with it, the KJA's okay, the workers' compensation carriers are okay with it, let's go forward.
Do you think it needs to take 4 years?
You know, I suppose it depends on what it is. You know,
What you learned from your process?
Yeah, I mean, somewhat. It was frustrating to me that, you know, I think some of those parties who we had to get their approval of, they were in the mix because they have connections with the legislators and they were donors, you know, and so that's the way it works. That's the way it works. We also had to hire a very competent lobbyist. Actually, had to hire a couple lobbyists to push the bills, you know, and that was expensive. And that's what it takes these days.
What do you think that bill cost to get through and passed? From beginning to end of those 4 years, what did it cost you guys to get that done? You're talking about hotel night stays and back and forth and lobbyists. And
it's hard to put a dollar amount on it because you talk about my time as well.
Yeah.
Like, what's that worth?
Yeah. Were you leading the charge on it?
I was part of kind of a consortium of other PEOs, and so we had some big name PEOs involved, ADP, Insperity, TriNet, which are enormous publicly traded companies, so they had their lobbyists and their attorneys involved, plus the association's time. I would somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million, I'd have to say.
Thousands and thousands and thousands of hours with everybody involved.
Yeah. Lots of Zoom calls.
But I guess your argument is that businesses and consumers are way better off. So this is the type.
Yeah,
is the type of a law that you feel is beneficial.
Yeah. And this is really a narrow portion of the economy. And, you know, the legislators said, and they'll tell you this, they said before we went into this legislative session that this is going to be a quick session. We're not going to do that many bills. We're going to keep it tight. And then they ended up with, 600 bills on the docket. And, I don't know how many passed, a couple hundred maybe. And so, you learn to take those things with a grain of salt,
Learning about that process, are you ever interested in being in politics?
A lot of people have asked me over the years, would I run for city council or whatever it is. But like I said, I don't have a home with a party, and I couldn't. You can't get elected in the state of Kentucky unless you have an R behind your name. I think we know that now, particularly in northern Kentucky and other rural areas. And there's probably not a space for my particular thought process, is what it seems like to me. Additionally, I'm focused on running a business, and
unfortunately, I think that's my opinion without pissing off all the politicians and who wants to listen to an entrepreneurial podcast anyway if you're a politician.
Yeah.
But what I consistently see in the community, the people like you and the many other business owners that have their head down operating their business, that have responsibility to their clients, to their employees, they would do an awesome job in politics.
Yep.
But the best don't have an opportunity or chance because they're so damn busy doing this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true. And there are good in Kentucky, in northern Kentucky, we have some really good elected officials.
Some ain't getting the job done, man.
Some are not. Yeah. But we do have really, really good ones. Part of the problem is if you are an elected legislator in the state of Kentucky, and I've brought this up to other legislators, it's very challenging to go to Frankfurt for 3 months a year and take away from your job. If you're a normal working American, it's challenging to do that. So what we get is business owners, which I think is good, but you also get a lot of lawyers, a lot of real estate agents, which you might think is good.
No.
They're represented.
I don't think just because you're a real estate agent you have any business in politics.
But they have the ability to take that much time off, right?
Not the ones who are doing well.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't. Just because you have a real estate license doesn't mean you do a great job as a real estate. Same thing as an attorney.
Yeah.
Practice makes you much better.
Absolutely.
So
well, and it's people who've been usually it's people who can take that much time off because they have the means, typically.
Yeah, and those people aren't the sharpest now, though.
Some of them are great, and some of them are not. And I think that, if you take any group
Isn't that anything?
It's anything.
I just hate that those are the people that directly impact us.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Anybody running a business that doesn't run it well, I don't have to go buy anything from their business.
Yeah.
So, right?
Yep, that's right.
If they're not opening on time, if they're closing late, their product sucks,
Yep.
I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
But you get a bad politician, they're impacting you.
I mean, they're elected, right? They're elected by their people, and so, but it's. I think you don't get, like you said, you don't get people.
You're not getting the best of the best, man.
Who will run? Who are willing to run? And in today's politics,
Who wants to?
Who wants to?
Yeah.
Because you really put yourself out there.
Yeah.
If you do that, and you got a target on your back, no question.
Yeah, it sucks. So you brought up earlier that you think we would come together probably on how we think about a lot of things over solutions.
Sure.
And so when you say that, why do you think that? Why do you think you and I would come together over solutions?
Well, I think we would disagree on some, but I know that you're a thinking, rational person just from talking to you.
All right.
And leasing office space from you.
Yeah, that I am very reasonable and rational there. We design and build out nice spaces.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm sure that, would you consider yourself that you have a level of expertise in the medical side of this HR business?
I mean, what I have is over a decade of experience in purchasing employer health plans. And so I have that perspective as a participant. And then I also have, a decade of reading articles and going through the transition of the Affordable Care Act and seeing how that affected small businesses, and just viewing it almost as an outsider, but also as a participant, because there's so many facets of the healthcare industry. And so my perspective is from a purchaser of health insurance plans.
Okay, so give me your take on where we're at with the medical insurance side of things in the state of Kentucky here. And there's more listeners we have in the state of Kentucky. But I bet I know all the states are different.
Yeah.
But it's probably kind of similar.
Yeah, I think it is. You have pockets that have more healthcare providers. And so there's more competition for services. And in rural areas, there's maybe only one hospital, and it's a true monopoly in, X county in rural Kentucky. And so the markets are different. And so even in Kentucky, it's a widespread of what it looks like.
Give me how, when I say explain healthcare in the state of Kentucky.
That's a very expansive question.
Well, let's go. Let's get expansive.
Explain healthcare in Kentucky. It's hard to answer that question. So we have essentially today, we have 3 large health insurance providers. So if you're a small business and you're going to go get health insurance for your employees, you have United, Humana, and Anthem are your options. And if you're somebody that believes in competition and you're a capitalist, you might look at that and say that's not enough options. And one of the problems that we have today in Kentucky is that one of those carriers, Humana, has decided we're not going to play in this space anymore. We're done. So now we're down to 2. And I see that as a problem that needs to be addressed. And then the other issue is that in Kentucky, we have some great hospitals and we have great health insurance providers. But like other states, because of the way the system works, where you have a third-party payer paying for your cost of care, there's a disconnect between the purchasers of healthcare and the providers of the healthcare services. So when you go to the doctor today, you're going to pay a copay maybe, or you might pay up to your deductible. So your doctor's going to say, the cost of service for your visit today was $220 and you're going to pay $50. And then they're going to say, go downstairs to, our imaging department and get an x-ray or an MRI. And one of the problems is that MRI might cost $10,000 at that provider that you're at, but you went there just because your doctor told you and you trust your doctor. But across the street, the same MRI could be $2,000. And that disconnect, but you don't know that because you're just paying your copay and your insurer is paying the full bill. So you don't have an incentive to go and find the cheaper MRI, even though it's across the street. And so that disconnect has been a problem in the United States since the 60s or so. And so that's true in Kentucky. It's true in California. It's true in the Midwest.
All right, so I'm going to throw out a couple things because we could get crazy and deep here, but I want to. So this podcast was brought up by me constantly texting and emailing you, complaining about this real estate company I run.
Yeah.
And so this is from a selfish perspective for my people. So we have over 100 real estate agents that work at our company. So nationally, the majority of realtors are 1099 independent contractors. There's actually reasons why.
Yep.
If I could make them employees and pay them a minimum wage and then let them get paid a commission, I would. But here's the problem. We have a 7-day-a-week job.
Yep.
So if you're my client, sometimes I'm going to work at 3 in the afternoon. Sometimes I'm going to put a 12-hour day on the weekends.
Yep.
We aren't in a position to pay people until a property closes and we receive the commission.
Yep. Yep.
So we sometimes work with buyers for 5 months.
Yep.
Sometimes we put a property on the market, doesn't sell for 4 months.
Yep.
I don't have revenue to pay them until the property closes. Also, I make an affiliation agreement with them that says, hey, when you close a property, the brokerage is going to receive the commission, and then we pay out X amount of dollars.
Yep.
Now, in the meantime, I'm taking a big financial risk by paying to operate the company.
Yep.
I'm projecting out we're good enough to bring them on board, educate them, have classes. We're keeping them in line with policies and regulations and rules, and we're all licensed and pay insurance. And so that's not too dissimilar from an independent attorney, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay.
I mean, most attorneys work for big law firms and they are W-2 employees.
Okay.
But then you have your individual attorneys.
Right. If it was a group of like 2 or 3 that work together and they ate
They're
what
partners,
they killed, and
usually.
Yeah. And so the issue is that to be an employee on a benefit plan, don't you have to work like 30 hours a week?
Yep. That's
Okay.
the rule.
So agents who want to work for me, a lot of people get in this business, they're like, it's after their first career's over. I want to work part-time. Mm-hmm. If I have a client this month, I might only have to work 15 hours.
Yep.
So, but then next month I might have to work 60 hours a week.
Yep.
So I'm caught this month. They have to work 30 hours a week. So they'd have to clock in and out legally.
Yep.
So therefore I'd have to pay them on revenue they're not generating. And then also on those weeks they work 60 hours, they'd have to be paid overtime.
That's right.
Right? It literally is a business that does not work for many to be an employee.
Yep.
And so by default, that I can't make the agents employees, they aren't allowed to participate in a group health plan.
In an employer-sponsored plan,
Right. Okay.
But they could. The option for them, and we've talked about this, is an association plan.
Okay.
Right?
But it sucks.
It's not good.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And so the thing that sucks is that I also know that when we have a good real estate agent who really represents clients well, man, there's a reason that during COVID I hated the term. We were a part of the essential list.
Mm-hmm.
Because the housing industry, not just a realtor, the housing industry is essential for this country.
Yeah.
Every time a house sells, Home Depot gets some money.
Yep.
Sherwin-Williams gets some money.
Sure.
People do blinds, a carpet company. And so there's a reason, and I see the job that realtors do. Can somebody sell a for sale by owner on their own? Yeah, if you're really, really good. But should I go into court and represent myself? No. I should have an attorney.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm laying this out because I'm going to go somewhere on it. Because I'm making an argument that it's bullshit that we can't participate in a group health plan similar to, like, why are we any less than a sanitation worker?
Yeah.
Why are we any less than a teacher? Mm-hmm. Why are we any less than a city employee who's cutting payroll for the employees in the accounting department?
Yep.
Right? Why are we any less than somebody fixing the roads?
Yep.
That So just because they work for a public entity,
Yeah.
or just because somebody works a job and makes $18.50 or $19.50 an hour for a local bank, or BP across the street pumping gas, or
Yep.
UDF.
Yep.
So if we're considered essential, but by nature how we have to work, I literally can't make them employees, this is bullshit.
Yeah.
And so, and I ran down some stats, and see, I don't need you to agree with me that's bullshit or not. That's just my statement.
I do agree with you.
All right, so I ran some stats. So there's 4.5 million residents in the state of Kentucky.
Okay.
Is that
Sounds right.
okay? There are 1.2 million people on the Medicaid system in the state.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm not making arguments about need-based or anything.
Yep.
I just know there's 1.2 million people that, because they're on Medicaid, there's a strong argument, and I grew up poor, so I'm going to use that too.
Yeah.
But there's a strong argument that they aren't participating at the same level of production of taxes, production of revenue for a bunch of realtors in the state.
Yep.
And we're not allowed to participate. Like, even let us pay.
Yeah.
Just let me pay a fair amount to be a part of programs.
Yep.
The same way that if you're an employee who's running the cash register at BP gets to.
Yep.
That if you're working at Burger King or you're working a manager of a restaurant.
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah, and there's been a huge growth in 1099 with, the Ubers and Lyfts
Yeah.
and whatnot. So people are not necessarily falling into these broad categories of what an employee is, and there's getting more of a population who falls into that other category now. And what do we do about that?
Yeah, what do we do? So I do want you to go into it, but here's
Yeah.
what I would say. I am willing, as an employer, if I would be an employer and not just a sponsorship of realtors, I would be willing to pay the normal share that a local bank pays for their employees for the program. I'm willing
Yep.
to pay that, and then our realtors are willing also to pay the amount that their employees pay.
Yep.
Like, we're literally like, let us participate.
Yep.
So you're covering 1.2 million people for either free or a reduced amount and letting
Yep.
them participate. You won't even let us pay.
Well, that's government-sponsored program, just to be clear, right?
Okay.
But in your case,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to sponsor an employer-sponsored plan.
No.
Where you get the tax benefit, where they get the employees get the tax benefit and you get the tax benefit for participating. And I agree, it's a problem. We started back in FDR times with this employer-sponsored plan situation that we have. Most countries don't do it that way. And a lot of people have proposed, why do we have employers in the middle of this? It disadvantages small businesses, even though, let's say you're a general contractor and you got 20 employees, right? If you go to the market and try to buy health insurance, you're at a huge disadvantage relative to, I'll pick on a local big business, Procter & Gamble, who they can self-insure because they have so many people and enough money, or they could go to an Anthem and have much more bargaining power, right? So the health insurance system incentivizes large people to go work for large businesses. And I think that's a problem because, especially in Kentucky, small business is the lifeblood of Kentucky. Our economy is it's organized around small businesses, and it's a big problem, and it's getting worse. Health insurance inflation is about 3% higher than your traditional CPI inflation year over year, and it's been like that for 20 plus years. And there's no sign that that's going to be different next year. In fact, the signs look worse.
So let me ask a question here. See, as I hear how things aren't going well in like England or Britain.
Yeah.
There's some issues with the government plan, right?
Yeah.
Canada, you hear about some restrictions.
Yep.
Right? So I'm not an advocate for that. But why? What would politicians make an argument to me about why every self-employed person can't pay their share and be a part of a big pool just like a huge company? Why will they not allow us to do this?
I think it's just – I don't think that a lot of politicians would disagree with you, honestly. I think that it's entrenched in what we do, And healthcare reform is really hard to change. Healthcare is, and I'm sorry, I didn't prepare my stats.
That's
but
all right.
It's approximately 18% of total GDP. Somebody can look it up.
Hey, Jack, can you look that up? Just see what the total share of medical costs
Or what's the share of healthcare industry as a percentage of GDP?
for the whole country,
And
right?
it's around 18%, which
Okay.
is bananas. And so a lot of people make money on that healthcare system, and they have a vested interest in keeping it the way it is today. So that's why it's hard to change, even small rules. So if you want to go to Congress and lobby that, you're going to have to fight the health insurers, the hospitals, the American Medical Association, the insurance agents, because they have a vested interest in keeping it the way it is today.
Hold on, though. I'm saying more people participating in a similar system.
Yeah.
What's their argument? I'm saying let us pay, because I have a bunch of healthy realtors. I don't think I have any adverse number of
Yeah.
unhealthy people that affect a group.
Yep. I think that's right. It's the problem is not not that.
Is it the
It's-
employers? Are there big employers fighting against this?
I don't know. I really don't know. I think what I know is that it's hard to make small changes.
You can go. So what's the percentage of GDP that is for overall medical insurance cost? How do you
Yeah.
want to say it, Charlie?
Yeah. I would say the healthcare industry, what does it present as a part of GDP?
For the U.S. economy. You can yell it out to us when you get it.
19.6.
So
What did I say,
20% of
18?
yep. So
Yeah.
we're rounding up.
Yeah. So I think it's hard legislatively to make small changes like what you're talking about.
Because this is just saying, guys, these things are already built and done.
yeah, makes sense.
Like, why can't there be a group,
yeah.
just like a huge company?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't there be a group that if you're self-employed, you can pay and be a part of?
Yeah.
And have the same expenses, and they can negotiate just like GM, who's building cars, or UPS in Louisville.
Yeah, yeah.
Who would argue against that? We're saying I'm not messing with the same system.
Yeah.
Let me say, hey, if you medical providers are happy with how it's going, let me give you more of the same.
Yep. No, I think it would be a good change. And the Realtors Association has a strong lobby.
We only
in
have 10.
DC.
We got 10. Yeah, nationally, but we only have 10. Isn't this state by state though, or would we be battling federal?
Yeah, I mean, could the state pass a law that
Where 15 let's just say
it's
realtors,
so
for
it's governed by federal law today. So under ERISA is what is getting in your way, I think. Somebody's going to check me on this. And so you'd have to make changes to what constitutes an employee under ERISA and what constitutes an employer, so that insurers could pull your group together as an employer-sponsored plan.
Like, let everyone who's a tile installer on their own.
Yep.
Like, if you guys, what a lot of people don't know is, if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's or Menards and you buy carpet or you buy cabinets or you use any of their installation services, a lot of times those are subcontractors.
contractor, yeah.
Those subcontractors don't get to have insurance. And here's what I'm going to say, get to have too. Man, these prices out on, on the ACA, the American 401k, whatever,
Yep.
they're bullshit.
Yep.
I go and look at what those prices cost us to buy an individual policy.
Yep.
And it's the same. If we go through the National Association of Realtors, there's 1.5 million people who are eligible to be part of that plan. It's the same number that gets pulled on the website for the federal government's plan.
Yep.
And it is a ridiculous BS number versus an employer plan on what it's costing them, the combination of them and their employee.
Yep. Yep. And a lot of employees don't know how much their employer contributes.
It's substantial.
To their plan. It's usually it has to be at least 50% of the single
It's
plan.
like 80-20, isn't it? A lot of times.
I'd say that's typical.
Yeah.
And so employees don't know, and so that when they go to start their own business and they're forced to go to the ACA, and they see what the full cost of a plan is, they're they're surprised.
Do you think I'm wrong though?
No, I don't.
I think the ACA is substantially higher than these full group plans that an employer pays between, from my example, maybe not, but it looks like to me, like if an employer is 80-20 and it's $1,000 to cover that employee for the month, and the employer is paying $800
Yeah.
and passing $200, That's not a similar expense. I'm going to go out to ACA and it's going to look at $1,600 or $1,800 or $2,000 a month.
I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm going to guess that it's similar to a small business total cost, but not similar to a large business total cost because they have bargaining power.
There you go.
Right?
So why can't every subcontractor that works in the state of Kentucky be a part of one group plan that gets to negotiate prices just like UPS in Louisville, just like Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati,
yep,
just like Kroger, just like any other big company? I think that's the bullshit.
Well, again, we have association plans, but you pointed out that they're often not run well or their prices are not that advantageous.
Mm-hmm.
And the real problem here is that Procter & Gamble can't afford it. And I don't want to pick on Procter & Gamble.
Let's say any large business. We could say Tesla. We could say Ford. We could say GM. Any big business.
Yeah, Apple, for example.
Yeah,
$100 billion in reserve cash. Right? It's not a huge blip on their radar, but for a small business, it obviously is.
You see it every day in your clients.
Absolutely, and I also see even on employer sponsor. So you're concerned that you can't pull your folks together for employer sponsored plans. I see employers choosing not to offer it, and they're under 50 employees, so they don't have to under Affordable Care Act rules, all the time because it's too expensive. And then I also see employers offering, skinny plans with a $5,000 deductible, which is normal now. It used to not be normal. Offering plans with a $5,000 deductible to employees that make $15 to $20 an hour, and they can't afford the premiums on that, and a $5,000 health expense would wreck them. That is an enormous problem that I don't hear hospitals, chambers, other people who are interested in the health insurance industry, insurance agents. I don't hear people talking about how big of a problem it is if you make $15 an hour, you can't afford it, and it would wreck your family's finances if you had to incur $5,000. Or usually plans are between $10,000 and $15,000 max out-of-pocket cost. $15,000 for somebody who makes $15 an hour, too much.
All right. So there aren't people, and correct me if I'm wrong, you'll know this. If someone breaks a leg,
yep,
you're not being treated, right?
Well, hospitals are required, if you show up at their emergency room, and maybe this is only true for nonprofit hospitals, but a lot of hospitals are required to treat you if you show up at their emergency room. So if you break a leg, show up, they're required to help you, or you get something worse and you're in an emergency situation. And in emergency rooms, any hospital administrator will tell you they're a loser on cost. But hospitals are making money. Mm-hmm. They're losing money in the emergency department, but they're making money in other areas.
So people are getting treated. Is this then mostly the preventative piece? The preventative, having a doctor, getting normal, like if you have a colonoscopy, is that the piece that's not being served from medical needs?
Oh, man.
I don't know this. I'm asking.
So there was and again, I wish I was more prepared.
Any questions you have, Jack, can look some stuff up for.
So there was a survey a few years ago where they asked doctors what percentage of medical treatment is unnecessary, and they interviewed, or the survey asked X number of doctors. It was only doctors, and the result came back at 20% of unnecessary procedures. So we're talking about imaging, other types of procedures that you might get, and so that is a big part of the problem. And their hospitals, and any doctor will tell you this, they're incentivized to prescribe procedures or do certain things in a certain way because that's where the profit center is. And that is one piece of the problem. There's others. Price transparency is also part of the problem. And we had an executive order on that in the Trump era. The problem is the penalties, from my perspective, are too low, and hospitals aren't complying on purpose. That's my perspective on it. And so, first of all, it's hard to comply with that rule. But let's say we had a system where hospitals had to say a broken leg being cast is X dollars and a coronary bypass is X dollars in a huge list. Then big businesses who self-insure, at the very least, would be able to say, you know, an MRI here is $15,000 and here it's $2,000. So we're gonna steer our employees to the $2,000, and that
prices would come down because of competition.
That gives us some competition, but it's not a true health insurance. Healthcare is not a true market like we think of when we think about, you know, the market for clothes or bananas, right? And the reason is because the demand curve in healthcare is very inelastic. In other words, if the price goes up, which it has been, we still need it. If the price of bananas goes up, you might say, if it's
I'm going to have an apple.
Yeah, I'm going to choose an apple. But that's part of the reason why healthcare is more like a public good, more like a road or a park or military defense, because it doesn't lend itself to what you would think of in economics as, you know, your typical market dynamics. And that's the reason a lot of people push for a single payer.
So what's going on in England, though? So I actually met
Yeah.
some people
Yeah.
when I was in Europe over the holidays, and they were expats who moved to Spain,
Yep.
and they still have siblings. They're in their 70s. They still have siblings in England. And they said, and this wasn't political, this is us sitting down at their table in their little villa in Spain over a bottle of wine. And she, the 77-year-old lady, Jane, she's awesome, her and her husband. And she told us about her sister, who was an employee forever, retired, a part of that system. She fell and broke her hip, and it took the ambulance 18 hours.
Yeah.
She's at her house with a broken hip. They made the call. She sat at her house for 18 hours with a broken hip.
Yep.
And didn't get picked up.
You know, for every story that I hear like that, and I'm not an advocate for a single payer system.
But I'd like
in
to
the
hear
United
arguments
States.
for and against.
Well, we have a friend who was in France vacationing, and their son had some type of medical emergency, and it required an ambulance ride and an overnight stay in the hospital, and they walked out with a $30 fee for parking. And they were extremely pleased with the service that they got in France. And so for every story like that, there's other stories about people who are happy with the single payer health, government provided health care, I think. And if you ask, I would love to see a survey about, you know, from English people, would you rather get rid of your single payer system or would you rather keep it? And I bet the majority would say they'd rather keep it.
Well, you'd need to have some context on what get rid of it means.
Sure. Would you rather go to a private market like the United States? When I talk to people who are from Ireland, England, and they look at our healthcare system, and I tell them, you could get a $15,000 bill if you got diagnosed with cancer, even if you're covered in health insurance. They think that's crazy.
So is it still there that if you're a wealthy person, you can pay for extra services?
Yeah. And that's
is?
what a lot of employers do in the UK.
Canada,
yeah.
maybe.
So you pay to skip the line, essentially. So, and if you need to, and for certain services. So it's above what the government provides. And so a lot of people there, they don't pay for anything, especially if you work for a big employer.
So if you say you're not advocating for a single payer,
Yeah.
why not?
I mean, just for the same problems that you discussed, I think it would be very challenging for the U.S. to shift from, and I'm not a policymaker, I'm a mere attorney who's
This
reads
is a solution
a lot.
conversation, yeah.
I think it would be very challenging for us to shift to a single payer model today because we have so many people with a vested interest in the system the way it is. And what we will end up with is just like the Affordable Care Act, a mishmash of policies that don't really work together. You would need a coordinated effort, and it would mean a lot of people lose. A lot of people lose because we're spending way too much money on health care, and a lot of people make money on that. And so it'd be very, very challenging, I think, to get a health care reform bill passed that's comprehensive.
So who loses that we don't have this system, though?
I mean, we've got so many people with their hands in the pot. PBMs are probably the first place to talk about that. They buy drugs from manufacturers and then they sell them to employer-sponsored plans. And then they keep the markup. And there's a lot of opaqueness in what they do and how much money they pay for the drug and how much they sell it for. So there's a lot of middlemen in the United States that you could get rid of.
That are making money off of the health of citizens.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I know a lot of health insurance agents, and a lot of them do a great job. But you can't, we talked about this, you can't buy health insurance for your employer group without going through an insurance agent. And they take, 10 to 15%? I don't know what they take.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, and they're
okay with that.
They're entrepreneurs and small businesses.
Advise me. Tell me what the best plan is.
Yeah.
If we have a problem, let me call you.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
But if it were less complicated, you wouldn't need that. You wouldn't need that service.
I just don't think that that industry, you can make it less complicated. It doesn't feel like it to me.
Yeah.
And so here's what I'm saying. I'm willing to pay my fair share. Let people make some money. But the stupid thing on this stat is, like nationally, in 2023, there's 93 million participants on the Medicaid system.
Mm-hmm.
So we have somewhere between 330 and 350 million citizens.
Yep.
Between the 51 states and the District of Columbia, so which I'm sure 51 is probably like Guam or Puerto Rico or something, I don't know. Between Medicaid and CHIP, over 93 million. And here's what's nuts. Those people, is that completely free health care?
Medicaid is mostly free for them.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's 93 million people in this country that are covered on that system. And from my same stats, there's only 27.5 million people in 2021 that were uninsured.
Yep.
What the F is the problem if we're already giving it to 93 million people for free?
Yep.
Keep the system the same, but do something for these 27 million people.
Oh, I thought you were going to argue for we have too many people on Medicaid.
No. See what I'm saying, man? I'm willing to say, you know what? If we're getting screwed and hospitals are making too much, and I'm not against doctors. I mean, doctors work their ass off in medical school. I want some of the best and highly skilled people to take care of me when there's something wrong.
Yep.
I want them there.
Yep.
Let us lower intelligent people sell homes.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that, right? But it's like, just come up with a plan to let us pay our fair share.
Yeah.
Not this exorbitant let us participate in these plans that probably over 100 million people are because of what their employer. Just let me participate in it.
Yep. And let you contribute to your employees. So you can attract better ones.
And I don't even give a shit about that. Like, let me just take the current ones I have.
Yeah.
And let me pay what a company that has 20,000 employees. Let me form a group.
Yep.
And let a bunch of subcontractors get together, and I'll just pay the same thing. I agree with that.
Yep.
They won't even let us.
I 100% agree with you on the independent contractor issue. I think it's a big problem. But the how many did you say are uninsured?
There's 27.5 million in the same stat where it said 93 million are on Medicaid.
Yep.
27.5 million were uninsured.
Yep. And so that's another part of the problem is that when those people go and they get diagnosed with cancer or they have an emergency need and they can't pay, and the hospital writes that off as bad debt and sells it to a debt collector at 9% or whatever it is that they sell it for, and the debt collector goes out and tries to collect it, and so the hospital lost all of the money that for treating that service. They have to charge us more in order to make up for that, right? So it's a tax on the system to have 27 million people uninsured and not paying.
Just let us pay our fair share.
Just let them pay.
Let us
Yeah.
pay, not some exorbitant bullshit because we're buying
Yeah.
these policies individually. Let me participate in a group.
Do you think are your realtors, are they not insured?
Here's what I think's happening. If you have a spouse because they're independent
Then
contractors,
they're on the plan.
yeah, that's what's happening with so many people,
Yeah.
right? But what I'm saying is that, but there's people who aren't.
Yep.
I have realtors who either aren't or having to go out and buy a plan that, man, I'm telling you, it is bullshit on these costs.
I don't disagree with you.
It's ridiculous. Like,
Yeah.
you'll have a single female of childbearing age that she might go out to the system healthy, and she might get quoted like $900 a month
Yep.
for a plan that has a $3,500 deductible, and there's not any copay or anything.
Yeah.
It's like the first $3,500 she spends on top of the $900 a month.
Yep.
So she's spending $10,800 a year
Yep.
plus $3,500, $15,000. Not even if just $3,500 normal cost. Get the flu. Need to go and get a Z-Pack.
Yep.
Need to go for normal checkups. $15K.
Honestly, from my perspective and seeing plans, that
Yep.
sounds like a really good plan at a really good premium.
But-
honestly,
So you're telling me that employer that has 10,000 employees,
yep.
that they're paying that for her?
No, probably not.
That's what I'm
But
saying.
small businesses,
But
are.
bullshit.
Yeah, small businesses are paying that.
Bullshit, though. That's what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that if there's these 27.5 million uninsured, and a lot of them are subcontractors,
Yep. Yep.
how about you let us get together? Let us get together and be an Apple and say F you.
Yep. But you can do that.
No, we
right?
can't.
You can do that with an association plan. That's the deal. They just don't work well.
No, it sucks.
Yeah.
And so therefore our costs are sky high again.
Yep, it's a real problem. I totally agree. And the ultimate problem here, though, is you ought to be able to form an association plan and go and get reasonable health care
Yep.
prices.
Yep.
The problem is it costs too much. It just costs too much. I mean, overall. And it's going up. It's going.
So then let me hit you here then.
Yeah.
Is that because there's 93 million people that are covered for free? I'm just being real. I'm not saying if it should or it shouldn't do that.
I mean, that comes out of our taxes, right? So
But
and-
maybe that's the reason why there aren't. I don't know. I'm sitting here thinking like that's a huge number.
yeah, so we pay for that with our taxes.
Correct.
But we still have to go turn over here and pay X dollars in premiums. So
But if that wasn't paid for free, I don't know what this. I'm just sitting here as a problem solve.
Yep.
If that wasn't paid for free, there would be some money to offset some other things too.
by the government, you mean?
I don't know if it's tax money from citizens that are paying it. If not as much money went to that 93 million,
Yeah.
you could keep some of that to also pay a smaller percentage to cover the other 27 million who aren't. I don't know how that's done, man, but here's what I do know about what government does. I don't know what percentage of that 93 million, but there's a percentage of that some of those people could pay.
Sure.
I don't know if it's a 500,000. I don't know if it's $1 million. I'm all about, I grew up poor, had food stamps at certain times, but we didn't get to stay on them forever, man.
Well, there's an income threshold for Medicaid, right? So if you and part of the problem, again, there's we could talk for 5 hours and not hit every problem. Part of the problem is with the income threshold. There's a what they talk about the benefits cliff. So people know if they go over a certain amount, they lose their Medicaid. So they have incentive
To not work hard and not
to
make
keep
more
their
income.
low. Yeah,
What's that number in the state of Kentucky?
I think it's 200% of. I'm looking over at the guys to research this.
Okay. So we're talking the state of Kentucky income qualification for Medicaid.
200% of the poverty line.
So what's the poverty line? So poverty income line in the state of Kentucky. Can you guys look that up?
It's different for families or households with 3 kids, households with 4 kids. So for individuals, it's probably 25,000 to 35,000, something like that. What is it? 26. So if you have Medicaid, you know that if you lose Medicaid, you're going to have to go out in the market and pay for these services. And it's going to be unattainable for you. So there's incentive to keep your income low.
But you know what I see too, man? I see this. I'm not talking about any individual person. I specifically hear people talk about this. Hey, we're not going to get married.
Yep.
Mom or dad, whichever one, has a lower income under that amount.
Yep.
And they qualify.
Until you reach a certain age, right? Yeah.
No, I'm just saying, like, let's say it's a couple that's not married.
Yeah.
And they have 3 kids.
Well, I would say you're saying that they don't get married because of Medicaid?
And some tax things and all sorts of stuff. And government benefits, yes.
I mean, if you have 3 kids and you get married, your household, what your poverty level is, goes up.
Goes up tremendously.
Tremendously, yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
there
if
might be
that-
an incentive to get married there.
But if that other person makes $60,000 a year,
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, then you might. There might be an incentive not to get married. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
so we're covering 93 million people
Mm-hmm.
for free in this country.
Yeah.
And there's 27.5 million people who aren't covered.
Yep. And those are the people that fall in the in-between gaps. So they make more than the Medicaid level, but not enough to purchase it. And that's a problem.
You're going to have to talk for a minute so don't lose my mind on here. It just, because, man, what I try to do in business, you look at a problem and you come up with a solution.
Yep.
And unfortunately, what I continue to see when we're dealing with government entities and bureaucracy and all these people that have a piece in the game, man,
Yeah.
you're like, it's kind of the way it is.
I'm like that?
No, I think in general, that's what most people say, like,
Yeah. That's just
kind-
the way it is.
so
That's the way it's always been.
right?
Yeah.
And it's so simple that if there were stupid problems like this that we had in our businesses,
Yep.
we would come up with an unlock.
Absolutely. I think it's really complicated, number one, like you said. And also, a lot of people with power and with money have a vested interest in it.
So what would need to happen for a group to be able to be formed in the state of Kentucky that a bunch of subcontractors are a part of that would allow us to go out and negotiate like a large employer does?
Well, you'd have to change if you want to do it as an employer, you'd have to change the definition of employer under federal rules.
What do we need to do to allow subcontractors to be a part of a plan together?
This is what I think that you should do, is you should, because you're the subcontractors, the Builders Association, I think is what probably most of them are part of. They have leverage in Kentucky and at the federal level. What I've never understood is why small businesses aren't going to their chamber of commerce and to their association and saying, this is a huge problem. We have to go to Washington and throw a fit. I've never really understood that, particularly for small businesses. To me, that's what you'd have to do. You'd have to pull together and say, we've got to make a change. Let's get our lobbyists that the association probably already employs.
Spends a lot of money.
Spends a lot of money. Let's hire the professional person on K Street in D.C. who you have to hire in order to get something passed. And let's lobby this for the years that it takes to lobby it and make the 1 or 2 tweaks that we need to make. That's what you'd have to do.
Those lobbyists are kissing somebody's ass, man, because the association has done it. And they put together this stupid-ass program that's just an overlay on top of ACA, which is on bullshit on premiums. And so whatever they did in the lobbyists we pay, they didn't go fight for it that way.
No.
They probably know the right people and back halls and, hey, don't make a big deal out of this. Let's just make it look this way. Let's give them something in packages that looks like this. And it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So something's happened where there's too much power there, where when they originally go and start knocking on some doors, there's probably like, man, you don't want to come in this room.
Well, yeah, other people have lobbyists that are saying to the same legislators, I don't want you to make this change.
Yep.
And
That have way more
they have
financial
more-
incentive.
And they have more power.
Yep.
Yeah. That's part of the problem.
So you can say we can do it, but here's I'm like, okay, that ain't going to
I
work.
mean, that's where you start, I think. I mean, if you pulled together, and we've seen other areas where we've had change at the federal level that people didn't want, big powerful people did not want. And the way that you do it is from the grassroots level. And small businesses have a lot of power. I mean, if you
the
got
chamber lever, is that what you're talking about?
Chamber, the small business associations, all of those people, if you could get them on the same page, but it would take small businesses calling and saying, we have to do something about this. We have to make it a priority. And it would take small businesses getting in the rooms where those associations with the lobbyists make the decisions about what their priorities are and demanding, this is a problem, we have to address it.
Here's why this is legitimately a problem. I'm just sitting here complaining. We've talked multiple times over the past 2 or 3 years.
Yep.
And about 6 months ago, I said, hey, man, can you dig into this? I want to find a way to be able to cover my realtors.
Yep.
And your response is?
So I went to several folks that put together different plans. And one person in particular who works for a big unnamed company and has a lot of power here, he said to me, you're the fourth call that I've had about doing something about realtors, and I've already looked into it. I have no answers for you. And the answer was association plans. And I could see in your face, you're like, that's not a real answer. But that's where we are today.
It's not fair like everybody else gets if you're an employer somewhere.
I agree. It's not fair. It's not fair.
So is it just like, oh, sorry, man, can't do it? Is that his response?
Yeah, it's his response, yeah. Yeah. And I don't know what it would take to pull that group together. My first thought as a lawyer was, I know there's an association rule, and we can pull them together for group health insurance plan and negotiate a plan.
There's like 15,000 of us in the state of Kentucky.
Yeah. I think the problem there is that if you're 1099, you're your own business owner. Mm-hmm. And you're contracting with these folks, but you want to make a contribution to their plan. But the way it's set up, if they were part of the association, they would have to make their own contribution. That's how it works today. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Unless you did one of those other types of plans that we talked about, which aren't really health insurance. I forget what they call them. But
yeah, that's what I asked you about.
Yeah.
Problem solve the hell out of this thing.
Yeah.
Like, because there's these large real estate companies nationally that advertise, we have an insurance plan. And you're instantly like, man, it's not really that, right? Yeah. So your concern with those is like, man, if something big happens, they can actually choose not to cover you.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into the rest of this about what you do and what you're finding in business with HR-related things these days.
Okay.
So what are you seeing with, for all the small business owners, this is an entrepreneurship podcast.
Yep.
And your clients are small businesses a lot of times, right?
Yeah.
So what are you seeing in the world of liability, challenges that employers are facing?
Yep.
What are you seeing?
I mean, the big thing that's happening right now is, post-COVID, a lot of employers are hiring employees to work from home, and they might be doing that in other states or other cities. And one of the issues is if you post a job and your best candidate is in Denver, Colorado, you now have to comply with Colorado's rules and Denver's rules. And if you have 10 employees and this is your 11th employee and you are, a small business that does whatever, but you're not an HR professional, it's impossible to comply, particularly if you have employees in, say, 5 different states and 5 localities. And part of how we got here, and what I mean how we got here is that we have a complex web of employment compliance rules that's different state to state, and even in sometimes can be different from city to city. And part of the way that we got here was the federal government has been so dysfunctional and hasn't been able to pass rules. It's left the states passing a lot more laws that affect employers. And so now we have a complex web, and it's impossible to comply with. It was hard to comply even before if you were an employer and you just had 10 employees in one location. And when you cross over 15 employee threshold, now you have to worry about Americans with Disabilities Act. And then you cross over 50 employees, you have to worry about FMLA. And it was challenging then. And there's new laws passed all the time that you have to comply with. So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge. So that's what I'm saying.
So is it like, hey, you better strongly really evaluate and consider on hiring employees in remote locations? I'm not saying not, but you have to really consider it. The expense, the compliance.
Yeah.
Right? It's substantial.
Well, you have to consider the expense and also the risk. You know, what's the risk of going to, I mean, I always say California, hiring somebody in California is like hiring somebody in another country because the rules are so different there. So
do you even have to go to work to get paid in California?
What do you mean?
I don't know.
You have to go to work?
I'd probably get a paycheck for 6 months and say, I'm sneezing today and I can't come in. And the state's probably like, I think you should still get paid.
No comment. I'm just not going to comment on that. I don't think so. No, I don't think that's true.
Well, you said another country, so I'm like, that must be completely different laws.
It is. I mean, it is. It really is. From an employer's perspective. And so what I'm saying is, if you're going to go to California, you need to consider all of the rules that you have to comply with and the risk for not complying for what is unknown to you as an employer, because you're not an attorney, an employment lawyer, you're not an HR professional. And so how do you quantify what the potential risk is and what you're exposing yourself from a liability perspective in California? It's difficult to do.
Do you know how to do that with your company in being this HR solution?
Yeah, so what we would do is we already have a footprint in California, as an example, in other states. And so we already have employees there who we're maintaining compliance for that employer. So we would put you into our policies. We've got, a 4 or 5 page amendment to your handbook that you would need to do business in California. So that's how we could help you. But I think it's just a shame that if you want to start a business and you want to hire employees, you need help from a qualified attorney. You need help from a qualified accountant, and that's been true for years. And now, I think more so than ever, you need help from an employment specialist like us.
Give me your experience as an entrepreneur, the CEO now of Current HR.
Yeah.
Should everybody do it? Should we not? Run away?
Oh, man. What a question. From
a little guy from Corbin, Kentucky.
Yeah. Being an entrepreneur is taxing. It's taxing. And I always tell people, whatever you anticipate your cost is going to be when you map out your pro forma, double it, depending on the industry. But it always costs more than you think it's going to cost. It always takes up more of your time. Expect to spend, particularly in the first 5 years of starting a business, expect to spend 12 hours a day working on your business. Expect that.
How many days a week?
At least 6, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that I do that right now every week. I've got 2 kids. I've got a family that needs my time. I'm extremely fortunate to have good employees that take some of that burden off of me. It took a long time to get there. It took a long time.
So why do it?
For me, there's a freedom component. And we've talked about this. Like, it's challenging if you've been an entrepreneur and you're an independent thinker to have a manager, looking over your shoulder and telling you do this, or following corporate bureaucracy, right? Following those rules. So that's one reason to do it. And another reason, a reason for me is money. I'm a capitalist and I'm trying to make money. That's ultimately it. And if you're an entrepreneur, you've got a shot at the big prize. For me, that's what it's about.
True financial independence.
True financial independence, and that's all I'm after. I'm not after a yacht. I'm not after a Mercedes. I don't care about any of that. I want financial independence.
What's that mean? I came up with the term, but you would have said could be financial freedom, financial independence. What's that mean?
Can we cuss on this?
I already cussed like 10 times because I'm so damn mad about this.
Some people call it, fuck you money.
Yep.
In other words, like, I don't need your job. I don't need your influence because I have enough money to support my family for X number of years. And to me, that's what it's about, And that number is different for everybody. I got a number. I'll keep it to myself.
Doesn't that number buy a Mercedes, though?
Yeah, it would.
Okay, because you said it's not about the Mercedes.
But I'm not doing it for that. I'm doing it for the independence. And in fact, I'd say I won't buy a Mercedes if I get, my number. Yeah.
What about work-life balance?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, if you're an entrepreneur, what you're saying, and the deal I'm making in my head internally is I have been working my tail off, and I'm not afraid to work my tail off. I'm going to work my tail off for me today, and I'm willing to do it for X numbers of years. But ideally, that turns into a scenario where I have more life on the work-life balance scale. And lots of entrepreneurs get to that level where they, it's passive income, and then they go out and start another business, usually because entrepreneurs typically can't sit still, right? But ideally, by the time I'm 55, 60, I've got more on the life side of the scale there.
You grew up in Corbin, Kentucky. Did you grow up, what class were you?
Lower.
Okay.
Hopefully my parents won't hear this, but yeah, I would say lower.
You turned out okay.
Yeah, I turned out all right.
All right. How do you make sure that your kids aren't negatively impacted by now being upper middle class?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I think about a lot because my kids go to a private school. There's no arguments about we can't buy this thing from the grocery store, And that was a big difference for me growing up poor to where I'm at now, which is I don't look at the grocery bill. We just buy what we need. And that was not the case when I was growing up, right? And so my kids do not have that conflict to worry about. What I think is while they're young, my oldest child is 7. While they're young, I don't want them thinking about money really at all, other than basic understanding of what money is and how we do it. But at some point, my wife and I are going to tell them, if you want to buy a car, you're going to have to earn money to do that. And that either means getting a job or working for us in some capacity and earning it. So we'll pay 50% of your car, and you have to pay the other 50%. So things like that, I think, some responsibility, some accountability from an early age with guidelines, within some framework, I think is got to be important if you have some means,
Because how many times has this feeling come up that I want them to have a better childhood and life than I did?
Yep.
How many times has that thought and even the words come out of your mouth?
Oh, I mean, infinite. I mean, it's constantly part of my inner dialogue. Yeah.
However, the way you grew up and how you grew up delivers this outcome.
Well, it did for me, and it did for my brother. And I think we've had this conversation. But, big but, if you look at my neighborhood, where I grew up, not everybody made it out, right? And particularly from my class, from my generation, who got decimated by the opioid crisis. A couple did, but most, didn't make it out in the way I did, I'll say. And I'm not talking about Corbin generally. I'm talking about my little neighborhood with the trailer park next door, that group of folks, and so I would trade some spoiledness for not having that percentage of outcome is what I would say. And I don't know how it was for you and your friend group growing up, the other folks that were in your situation, but that's my perspective.
Well, I don't think it's tough to compare any two scenarios, two neighborhoods, but I don't think that addiction is a different piece.
Yeah.
Right? That's separate. Not everybody that's poor has addictions.
Sure.
It's probably a higher degree.
It is, yeah.
But a lot of the people around where I grew up, there's a big group that fits into all the categories. But I don't think you have to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-mm.
So what's success? Is it being able to educate yourself at a level where you can have a job where you can pay your bills?
Yeah.
Where you're not relying on the government,
yeah.
where you don't have to be on Medicaid. I think because at that point, if you can get to that point in your 20s, in your 30s, and you want to have a family and you have it, then you have decisions to make if you want more.
Yep.
Right? Then you can decide. Then that's on you. But I guess to give a greater percentage to what you're saying is to give them maybe a better shot.
Absolutely.
Is that what
I want to give them? I want to give it the opportunity,
yeah.
and they may or may not take advantage of that opportunity.
So, but how did you have the opportunity, but the others didn't? Because you're talking about your neighborhood.
Yeah, I think the difference between, well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to speak ill of my neighbors growing up. I loved them. What I know is that even though my parents did not have the means, they were invested in me. They loved me, and I knew it. And I think that was a big difference for me and my brother. My brother he lives in LA. He works for Fidelity. He makes a bunch of money. He can buy, a condo in LA. He can buy a car when he needs to. And I think that is he's very successful. And so when you look at us two, we both had, that loving parents scenario. And I think that's a big difference. I really do,
So I had an expectation. I had one very good, caring, responsible parent and one who wasn't. I had still in that environment, my mom was awesome. There was an expectation that I did my homework,
mm-hmm.
that I received acceptable grades in school.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
There was that expectation.
Yep.
And so is that society's job to
have that
to enforce that upon parents?
I don't think so. I mean, we talk a lot about, I think at the political level, what's the family's job, and the government shouldn't intervene there. And I think that's true. And it made a big difference for me because I had the same expectations. I think the love piece was probably the bigger aspect for me because I knew I was loved, and I was encouraged, all those things.
What's generational poverty mean? Because you didn't. Your parents probably raised it a level from how they grew up.
I think they did,
and then you raised it a level.
Yeah.
So whose fault is generational poverty? And I'm not trying to place fault, but you have to say where's the problem, so then the problem can find a solution.
Sure.
And then is that something that we should even be enforcing?
I mean, to me, you can say it's not the right question.
Okay. What's the right question?
The right question is, do we have opportunities in our society for people to move up in their in the next generation?
Yes.
Do we have opportunities?
Yes.
And
tell me if you think. But yes, me and you are here.
Well, I think that those opportunities are there. I think the gap is closing, and because we have today in our economy more and more and more resources going to the top 10%. That's just a fact, right? And so I think today's young people have a very challenging time, for example, buying a home because of what it costs to buy a home today. Even if you have a good job, the cost of real estate has gone up. And I'm talking in your industry now, so you're giving me a look.
Let me give you an example.
Sure.
Okay, so that's your opinion.
Yep.
And that's a lot of people have that opinion.
Yep.
I just showed a condo yesterday so this is going to be very specific, so people can go out to Realtor.com. You can go PivotRealty.com and look it up. There, I showed a home on Rolling Hills Drive. It's a condo that Fisher Homes built. This is a really nice condo development. It's officially considered Covington, Kentucky.
Yep.
Right? But it's really an independent. It's down 17.
Yep.
All right, so this condo, 2-bedroom, 2 full bath, probably 10, 12 years old. You walk in really nice.
Yep.
Stainless steel appliances.
Yep.
So I'm showing it to a single girl, and it's listed for $179,000.
Gotcha.
And comps in the neighborhood say it'll sell from anywhere from $175 to $200.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, so I show it to her. I send her to the loan officer at Bank of England to get a pre-approval in advance. And she first comes to us and says, so she has a job locally. She makes about $60,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Recently out of college, doesn't have any money saved.
Yep.
And so, but she's paid her bills.
Yep.
So she has an acceptable enough credit score for the bank to say, I'll lend you some money.
Yep.
So, but she doesn't have a down payment.
Mm-hmm.
But the loan officer said, hey, there's something called Kentucky Housing.
Yep. Yep.
And if you make under a certain amount, there's a $10,000 grant right now.
Yep.
So that $10,000 grant will cover her 3% conventional down loan.
Yep.
And if I go to the seller and say, hey, I know you want $179,900, but hey, I know it's a really competitive market. How about we pay you $184,000 and you contribute at closing $4,000 towards closing costs and prepaids.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that girl is responsible for is an inspection for $500
Mm-hmm.
and a $500 earnest money check that gets credited towards a purchase.
Yep.
She can buy that for $500, man.
Sure.
So I'm just telling you that that's not reality.
I think this is what I think.
Yeah. And we just sold a home for a $440,000 in Covington to
Yeah.
a single mom last night who only makes $43,000.
Yeah.
There's programs for her in the river cities.
Yep. So there are programs out there to help with down payments, no question,
Yep.
and that has helped first-time home buyers.
Mhm.
But I would love to see statistics
Mhm.
about the rate of first-time home buyers from the 70s to today.
Okay.
And I know that it's gone down. I know it's gone down. We have more young people renting today than we ever have.
Well, that's their fault. That's stupid.
Well, you don't think that the cost of real estate, the cost of inflation has had an effect on that?
I don't think nearly. So the people that we work with on a daily basis, I think the jobs that I see that are available between $40,000 and $75,000 in our marketplace,
Yep.
that then you can go buy $150,000 to a $250,000 home. That mortgage payment is equal to rent now if you rent an apartment.
How many single-family homes fall into that price category today?
There's a lot, man. I mean, if you go downstairs in our sales board right now,
Yeah.
I bet if we sell 60 homes in a month, the average price range is up significantly.
Yep.
But we can, like right now, if you go down there, there's $199,000 listings.
Yep.
There's
Yep.
250s. We're selling 600s and 800s.
Yep.
But I think half of our transactions every month are under 300. They really are.
Okay.
And so the good. What I love about this is I'm willing to be wrong on anything I talk about. I am, right?
Likewise.
And so, but we are seeing example after example after example. And then also, like to tie this in with the poverty piece.
Yep.
Guys, our top performing agent in my company, the guy doesn't even have his college degree, Charlie.
Yeah, yeah.
He was dealing blackjack at the casino 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Got his real estate license, worked his ass off. And the guy makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year now.
Yep.
Owns a $500,000 piece of real estate, a multi-use piece of real estate in downtown Covington.
That's great.
That is completely paid off now. That he lives on the second floor, that he doesn't even have to pay rent, and there's a bar on the first floor that pays him rent.
That's awesome.
So what made that guy want to work hard? He grew up in a place called Crystal Lake in Independence on a little small ranch with no basement.
Sure.
And went to a public high school.
My argument is not that it's impossible, and if you work hard, you can do it. What I'm saying is the opportunities are decreasing, and it's getting harder.
Bullshit.
So we just want to agree to disagree.
Well, I just think because here's what I know. I'm not saying. You know what I think? You know why I think it's harder? Because I think the mindset's weak now. I think the mindset. Here's what I see, man. I know how hard your parents worked
Yep.
and how hard my parents worked. They worked harder than we work now, physically.
You mean like on average,
Yeah,
generally?
yeah. I just the
generation.
factory jobs, and you know what they
Yeah.
didn't have, man? They didn't sit there. Their priority was like to provide for their family. We had one car.
Sure.
A lot of times we had one bathroom for families.
Yep.
And these were blue collar, lower class people. And they weren't sitting here bitching about, I need $2,000 for the new iPhone. I need to make sure the government covers my cell coverage.
Yeah.
If you're on Medicaid, hey, also we're going to make sure you have cable. Man, we didn't get that shit.
Yep.
I know what we got was a small amount for food stamps that you can only use for certain types of things.
Mm-hmm.
And there was places where people say government cheese, that's funny, but that was a real thing. You could go get milk, you could get cheese,
Absolutely.
and the basics.
Yeah.
You don't get money auto-loaded to a car, rolling up to a Shell station, and getting $25 of Mountain Dew and chips. Here's the thing, I don't give a shit. I see it. We didn't get to do that, and
Yeah.
even if we did, our parents didn't spend it on that.
Yep.
They weren't buying Hostess and Ho-Hos and bullshit. And so it seems like there was more of a sense of responsibility and commitment to, let me make sure I do my part. Instead of this handout, let me make my life easier.
Well,
And argue with me on that. That's just,
Sure.
I'm
So-
rigid about this.
so there's a nonprofit in Covington called Be Concerned.
Mm-hmm.
There's food pantries.
We do a ton of work for Brighton Center, man.
Yeah.
We did Build-A-Beds.
Sure. But those exist. Not all of those people are Hostess Mountain Dew buyers, is my point.
I'm not saying all of them.
There's a lot of people who are doing their damnedest to make ends meet. And a blown tire or an unexpected expense derails them. Because when you're poor, as you know, your economic situation is a house of cards. And you take one card out and it falls away completely. And we have more and more people in that scenario today than we did before. When in the 60s, 70s, you had a scenario where most households had one income earner. And today, it's got to be two. If you want to have kids, if you want to have daycare for, before school, after school, you got to have it. You got to have the two income earners. And it's very challenging, I think, for those people to put up enough money to participate in the real estate market. And maybe that's not true in our market particularly.
Here's what I'm going to say. I'm not taking an opinion and going on a side of this or not. But here's the facts, man. There's people making decisions to be single-family households today.
Sure.
And I'm not a conservative guy.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the fact. That's a fact.
And
And so what I'm saying, when that happens, there's not enough money in the house.
yeah.
There's different dynamics happening than we were growing up. Our poor families, one person did work a lot of times, but you had a lower expectations of the things you got to have. And the substantial amount of that money just went towards the family.
Sure.
I'm seeing different things today in society, man. I'm seeing different things valued. Here's what I saw. And man, I'm not willing to have a filter to not talk about the tough things. Here's what I saw. It was so impactful to me when we went in and we did Build-A-Bed.
Mm-hmm.
Because there were these kids. Man, we did 100 of them in a day.
Yeah.
Our real estate company. And we built the frames, dismantled them, took them into the houses. And I personally, since I was a poor kid, I hadn't been into similar houses like this.
Mm-hmm.
And it reminded me a little bit of it. But here was the difference. Now, those kids were the same as me and you.
Mm-hmm.
They might not have been loved the same, maybe not the same attention. I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. But those kids didn't have a bed. Did you have a bed?
Yes.
Okay, so did I. But you know what was in a lot of those houses?
What's that?
100 pair of gym shoes.
Mm-hmm.
Video game systems hooked to the TV.
Yeah.
iPhones and Google phones that the parents had in their hand.
Mm-hmm.
Our parents didn't do that shit. They bought our bed.
Yep.
So I'm not trying to, man, this isn't about me, but I'm saying those families are living a similar system to a lot of the people that I looked at and grew up around. And if that mom or dad in this single household if they have to stay home and watch the kids, well, that's the same thing our parents did, but there were two of them together, and one went to work.
Sure.
So push back on all this.
I mean, what you're talking about is societal
Decisions
issues.
and responsibilities.
And I don't have data on that. People make bad decisions about their financial, situation.
Yep.
And what I do know from just experience and working for nonprofits, my wife and I started our own nonprofit, which I think we talked about, Kindness Lens. And I volunteer for Covington Partners, which is a
education,
we support the school system.
Yep.
So from that experience, what I know is that there are families who are trying and they want a better life for their kids, and it's very, very hard. And I also know, just from economic data, that more and more of the production, the resources in our society today are going to the top 10%. That's cited a million times, conservative newspapers, whatever. We know that for sure. And the economy has grown, and wages have gone up significantly recently. But since the 70s, they've mostly stayed flat relative to inflation. And more have gone to the top 10%. And maybe that's capitalism. Maybe that's just what it is. But it was capitalism still in the 50s. It's still capitalism today. I do think it's getting more and more difficult for people over the years. And some people, I don't disagree with you that there are probably examples of people who make bad financial decisions.
Do you know you could take any of these families that are, because man, I'm all about it. I'm on an advisory board now about trying to help education.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all on board, man.
Yeah, we both give back.
Right, 100%.
Yeah.
But what I'm seeing too much in that side is also not making sure that there's some shared responsibility by those people to make sure that we don't continue that to the next generation.
Sure.
Like, don't just have your hand out. Have the handout and allow this thing to help you, but make sure that that's pulling the next generation up to make sure they do what our parents did.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm saying, man. So this generational poverty, there's responsibility that lies in the public, but there's responsibility that lie with individuals as well.
I think we're really talking about two different things. And when we've had this conversation before, I think what I said was, I'm not disagreeing with you about where society is, and maybe there are some people who have lived off of government assistance and they're choosing the wrong financial path. That exists. Mm-hmm. I don't know policy that fixes that. And we have been trying policies and proposing policies for years.
Democrats, Republicans, everyone.
That. And so I don't have an answer.
It's individual. So how do we do it? Yeah. So what do we do? Because
my answer is always, I want opportunity for as many people as possible, and I want the cost of childcare to be reasonable. I want the cost of health care to be reasonable. I want the cost of transportation to be reasonable so that people can do it. Because there are some people who, regardless of what I'm saying is you've got some examples of people who choose not to do it because of laziness or whatever it is. And what I'm saying is let's educate as many people as we can with good public education so they have the opportunity to do that. And maybe the answer is what we've been doing is adding more financial literacy to, high schools and whatnot. Maybe that's the answer. I just want to see as many people who are like me get the education and the ability, the opportunity to work hard and make it out.
You don't think our society responsibility, you don't think society provides that opportunity better than it ever has? The opportunity.
I think there is a path. I think the path is narrowing. That's what I'm saying.
Why?
Because of just based on where we see the resources going today. Cost of, you don't have kids, right?
No.
Okay. Cost of childcare is exorbitant. and it's challenging.
I talk to our agents all the time.
Yeah.
I hear this number of like $1,000 a month,
Yep.
$1,200 a month for a kid.
Yep.
I understand, man.
Yep. And that makes it very hard. We want people. We have a demographics problem in the United States right now. We have too many people in the 65 plus category, and it's getting worse because of the baby boomer generation where we had a growth in population. And that is a problem. We want people to be in a position where they can have a family and support the family. We want that. And with the cost of childcare, I think the public education system has been probably on a decline, and I love our public educators, and I agree with most of our superintendents. I think that they are doing the best job that they can. I think that particularly recently, it's been a challenge to keep teachers, and so I think public education has been on a decline here recently. And I just want us to invest resources that help families and encourage people to have kids, and encourage people to have that family. And so that children have somebody who loves them and supports them and checks on their grades. That's what I think. And if the cost of childcare and the cost of healthcare and the cost of healthcare is expensive, the cost of having a child is more and more expensive, and so people are disincentivized to have kids. And I do think that's a problem in our society today. Do you disagree with that?
I think there's so much context around this conversation.
Yeah. It's hard.
But here's where I'm at, man. It's just because if you give me anybody, my industry specific, way easier to be in my business than yours.
Yeah.
Now, we work 7 days a week. We put in a lot of hours to do well. But you can get a real estate license and make big commissions. All you have to do is graduate high school.
Yeah.
Graduate high school. If you can graduate high school and then pass a background check.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that fit into that category.
Sure.
That could get a real estate license. There's no restrictions.
Yep.
Come up here and talk to my company.
Yep.
You're 24 years old and you worked at Burger King your whole life? You think you want to put some hustle and grind in and work hard and change your life? You want to get out here and do open houses and not get paid till it closes? You want to get out here and learn and prospect neighborhoods and try to connect people and make social media videos and all that? You want to work hard? Here's what I'm telling you about the opportunity piece. Bullshit. We will hire you.
Mm-hmm.
You can come work with our company. I'm
do you
Go ahead.
just not challenging you?
Yeah,
on
no,
this, education.
Yeah.
Do you think that anybody with a high school education can do it? Because you know that some people don't have the ability to do it, right? Some people have come in and floundered, right?
Here's what I know. If you can pass a real estate exam, so if you get your college degree,
Yeah.
and you pass a background check,
Yeah.
State of Kentucky, it's like an FBI level.
Mm-hmm.
Pass a background check. You need to because you're in people's homes,
Yeah.
right? Dealing with people's financials.
Yeah.
And then you have to go through education. It's a very low barrier to entry. It's a 120-hour education piece that you can do online in the state of Kentucky. Then you pass a proctored exam, and then you go take the state exam. If you get to that point,
Yeah.
we have 100 and something people who are realtors with my company.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of them that get through that, Charlie, and they don't work hard.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but what I'm telling you is I see people with all different levels of intelligence,
Yeah.
different IQs, different natural abilities talking to people.
Okay.
But the one similar thing that determines the outcome, I am blown away sometimes when someone comes in, I'm like, they're going to struggle.
Yeah.
They don't have the personality, they don't have this, and then they bust their ass and they work hard, and 3 years later, they're making $85,000, man. I'm telling you this, and the only indicator is work ethic.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that all those people, everyone can. They could.
Yeah.
I know this, that the resources that the Boone County School public system had when I went to Goodridge and Connor High School, I know that the resources that society paid for me to go through that education system was fewer dollars per student when I was going to school
Yep.
than is being paid now.
Yep.
I know that.
Well, just general inflation, wage inflation and whatnot would have affected that. But I get what you're saying. let me ask
Yeah.
one more question.
Yeah.
If somebody started as a real estate agent today,
Mhm.
how would they get paid until they get their first?
They don't. Just
They
same
don't.
thing I did.
So don't you think that's a barrier of entry for a lot of people who are paycheck to paycheck to join the real estate
Depends on your
industry?
mindset, man. Here's
Yeah.
what I tell every day. When there's agents that come in, I'm like, guys, the first 6 months of your life's going to be really tough.
Yeah.
If you are quitting a job or you're starting this and you're not receiving a paycheck, here's what I know about what this outcome can be. There's a chance you only sell one home in 6 months.
Yep.
You might make $3,000 or $4,000. Move into someone's basement. Move back home. Give up the apartment. Do something.
Yep.
Do something where you can really tighten your budget.
Yeah.
Come up with a plan that over 6 months you can at least just cover your costs.
Yep.
And if you can't, make a plan over the next 12 months. Make that plan, get out of that expense scenario, and then get your license and come work with us. Because then if you're diligent for 6 months and you're willing to make that sacrifice,
Yep.
the outcome is going to be way better than being an employee. And here's what I will say. If me and you are paying to go to college for 4 years, we're paying. We're not making money.
Oh, sure.
So if we're paying to do that,
Yeah. Yeah.
some kids live at home. Some kids take extra debt out to live at school.
Yep.
We're paying to be educated on a non-specific thing.
Yep.
I'm just saying you don't have to pay me, but give me 6 months.
Well, and I think what I was getting at there was, if you're 22 and single.
I was 25 and single
okay.
and had an apartment, never owned a property in my life.
Okay. But a lot of the people that we're talking about that are having trouble making ends meet and their financial situation is a house of cards, they have a family and they have rent. So is it possible for them to do that?
You know what's possible? Come to our night classes that we have for training. You know what's possible? So here's all I'm saying.
But they don't have a paycheck for 6 months
So guess what? Work 9 to 5 somewhere
and do it on the weekends.
and come here at nights and weekends because our agents are having to do open houses on weekends anyway, showings on weekends. So here's what I'm seeing, man. I'm seeing the same opportunity when me and you were growing up,
Yep.
that our parents busted their ass and didn't have a huge upside.
Yep.
Me and you busted our ass. Your brother busted his ass. And so at some point, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 generations ago of your poor-ass family, someone made a decision.
Yep.
Not the government, because the government wasn't helping nearly.
Sure.
There weren't this. At some point, somebody said, it's on me. I have to make sure the next generation.
Yeah.
And I know your natural heart's like, Mark, be nice. Be easy. Come on, man. They don't have this. And I'm like, okay, that can be a reality.
Yeah.
But what happens when you see the people that did make it out? What happens when you see the people that worked hard? And it's like, guys, that's the algorithm. Yeah, you can say it's not easy, but has your career been easy even once you started it?
No, and absolutely. I've worked so hard to get to where I am. Absolutely. I think where we disagree is it's probably bleeding heart, and we've had that conversation. Is that I believe that there are people in our community today, and I've seen it, who don't have that opportunity because they have a family, because they have responsibilities. It would be impossible for them to do that. And maybe there are other opportunities out there. And I think part of the issue is they don't know what the opportunities are, and they don't know what it takes. And they weren't modeled for them. What does it look like to bust your ass and go after a goal? They don't know that.
That's our system,
and
man.
Is that their fault? I don't know.
No, it's somebody in their previous generation's fault.
It could be. I don't have an answer for that.
Man,
I agree with you that if you're willing to work hard, you can do it. We agree there. I'm just saying there are some people who, because of the stage in their life, because of their family situation, that they don't.
I agree with it. So what are we supposed to do then?
This is what I think. We should have healthcare reform to lower the cost of healthcare because it's a basic necessity. We should have a real, true safety net for people when they fall through the cracks. We should try and lower the cost of childcare so that people can have children and they're incentivized to do that. And we should have a public education system that we invest in so that every child can have the opportunity and can learn those skills, right? That's what I think. That's what I think. And we're falling short on some of those metrics. That's what I think.
Did we have those? Did our parents have those growing up? I'm saying yes or no. Did they have them?
I mean, childcare was not as expensive as it is today.
Mm-hmm.
Healthcare was not as expensive as it is today. I cited before.
Do you know why child care wasn't?
Why?
Because it wasn't necessary how society operated. Because families took care of it.
Still, there was a market for childcare.
Very small. Man, none of the kids I know personally
Yeah.
that I grew up in my poor community went to child care places.
But why not? Why did they not? Because they had one parent who was staying home?
Yeah, most likely. And so all I'm saying is that whose responsibility is that? Is that the citizen's responsibility, or is that the government and public's responsibility?
And what I'm saying is because of the increase in the cost of healthcare, all of these things, right?
Yeah.
It's a necessary component essentially to have a two-income family today.
You know, I'm not arguing this Medicaid thing.
Okay. You're not arguing that it's too much, is that what you mean?
I think there's people in there that probably could contribute a little bit more effort to our society.
Sure.
But I'm not saying not help people, man.
Yeah.
I'm not saying not make sure people can eat, but don't let them stay on that shit for 10 years.
Sure. I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Right? And what I know is happening is that's what their kids are seeing.
Yeah. I 100% agree.
So it's like I agree, man, that I want to help those people up that somebody didn't give them the right childhood.
Yeah. Well, here's one of the answers, and this is on me and you. We need professional men and women to mentor people, low-income students in our schools, and Covington Partners provides a mentorship program. I did it for 7 years for a young kid. And what we need to do is mentor kids and say, there's another path. And we need to take them down to Covington Latin schools and say, look at this school and compare it to your school. Children go here, and they have a different opportunity than you have. And tell them, when I was a kid and we went to the grocery store, we weren't able to buy everything we need. And now I can when I go. Because I think that a lot of those kids don't know any other way of life. And I think it's incumbent on us as members of the community to mentor them and tell them there is another way. And the way that you do it is you bust your ass in middle school, in high school, and in college if that's your path, or trade school, and you bust your tail when you get out. And you, in order to overcome your poverty situation that your family has been in for X generations, it's going to take grit and hard work. And I don't think that every child has gotten that message. And some of them maybe don't want to, but I think a lot of them, if they could see the future, if somebody could show it to them, then they would. And I agree with you. I think that's part of the problem.
Hey, thanks for coming in today.
Was this good? Was this okay?
Oh,
okay.
Of course it was good. And so I think any parting shots on
we're still friends, right?
Dude, here's what I want. Like so many people, these are the conversations. See, this is how strategy happens in companies.
Yeah.
When you put 2 or 3 or 4 really committed and intelligent people around a table and you have passionate debate about things,
Yep.
there's good stuff that comes out.
Yeah.
There's so few people that are unwilling to have it and then go back and consider the arguments and be willing to be wrong.
Absolutely.
And so I think we used to have it, and we're probably missing that now.
No. And I love having this conversation with you. Yeah. I never feel like I could see that you you have deep feelings about it, but I've never felt like, oh, you're attacking me.
Nope, that's
and
good,
I hope
man.
you haven't felt that way.
No, because all I really want these kids to know. So we went down to AMC Newport on the Levee, and I rented out a theater 2 nights ago to see the movie Air.
Oh, you did?
Which is about Nike landing Michael Jordan. Yeah. And so a big group of us went. Neither one of these guys, they had too much going on, I think. But
I was there.
He was there. So I think there was like 55 or 60 of us that went.
Okay.
And I'm walking in. I got there early because, we paid for it and tickets for drinks and popcorn and all that. But I was walking in, and there was a kid that doesn't look like me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, doesn't have the color skin as me, doesn't have the same hair as me. I don't have much hair anymore, right? But he had more hair. He was a lot bigger than me. He was a little overweight, but he had an AMC shirt on.
Mm-hmm.
And I come up and we're getting to the elevator, and I was like, going to work, huh, man? And he's like, he kind of looked at me. Guys like me probably don't talk to him much.
Yeah.
I could tell. I read situations. He's like, yeah. I was like, what do you think about work tonight, man? No, that's all right, all this. We get in the elevator, push the button. And I said, what do you do here? And he said, I said, do you do everything or something? He's like, no, I mix up the popcorn and make sure you guys get popcorn. I was like, man, I bet you're going to be making something for us now. I appreciate you. And he looked at me, and I reached out my hand. I was like, hey, what's your name, man? He said, Corey. I said, I'm Mark. Nice to meet you. And we got off, small talk. The rest of the night, I saw him about 6-7 times. He smiled and looked at me and said hi every time.
Yeah.
Right? Now, something about that kid's life made him get a job. He's 17, he said. Coming to work after school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we all started there.
Yep.
At those jobs.
Yep.
I think that's society's job to give him that opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? Wherever he went to school, and I bet, who knows? I don't know where he came from. Don't know if there's a mom or dad home. I have no idea. We could put stereotypes on it. I'm not going to do that.
Yep.
But I know that was a unique, different interaction for that kid with a guy like me.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. Yeah.
However, that little small moment told that kid, oh, there's some good people out here.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if they don't look like me, like, oh, man, that's a cool little interaction. But I know this. This society has provided him the opportunity
Sure.
that me and you were into.
Yep.
I don't know what he's going home to. That might be the difference.
Yeah.
Don't know. But he now has the same chance at 17, accepted a job. Somebody hired him
Mm-hmm.
to keep going. And so my passion behind this entire thing is around opportunities and choices.
Sure.
I just and so this whole thing, man, I don't know. And I'm sitting here and we just go through this whole night and you look at who Michael Jordan's parents were.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, his mom's a badass.
Yeah.
And it's like that society then created that.
Yeah.
No matter the struggles that she was in, she was
Yep.
probably born, or even her in a previous generation, around slavery.
Yep. Yep.
And I'm just like, man, so I'm thinking, what responsibility, what requirement, and I'm looking around and I see plenty of opportunity for these kids to raise their hands. But here's what I do want. I want every kid to know that they can be Corey.
Yeah.
You're not going to get $1 million starting out, man.
Yeah.
I know Instagram's telling you should have, but it's just not there for us.
Yeah.
And I know this too. See, there's different levels of privilege. See, this word privilege showed up 4 and 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's been privilege for generations.
Sure.
Here's what I know. I was not raised where I could attend Covington Catholic High School right down the
Yep.
road. There's a level of privilege that those families, that the previous generations went there, and it was just built in. They have the money. That's the expectation.
Yep.
That's a level of privilege
Mm-hmm.
beyond what I had.
Yep.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And I was okay with it as a kid. I just knew it was my job to get up every day. And then also next level, somebody whose parent is an attorney,
Yep.
your kids,
Yep.
a person whose parent becomes a politician,
Mm-hmm.
a parent who is a CEO of a company, those kids are going to start out on second base in a ball game.
Yep.
Me and you started out probably in the dugout in that analogy of life.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
Sure.
I'm just like, listen, as long as every kid has the opportunity me and you had, and Corey, and I do push back tremendously that the kids don't have an opportunity. And if you say they don't, it's only because what they're going home to at night, man.
I'm not saying that they don't. I think let me start with where we seemingly agree.
Yeah.
Which is that we want opportunities
100%,
for those kids.
100%.
And we want people to know, we want kids to know who are in those situations that it's possible.
Yep.
And there's a path, and we want...
And it's not that complicated.
It's not that complicated, and we want someone in their life, the school or society generally, or somebody on an elevator to show them where the North Star is, right? We both want that.
Yes.
And Where we disagree, it seems, is that all that I'm saying is that the opportunities are narrowing because of the way our financial system works today, and because of how much GDP goes to the top 10%. That's all I'm saying. I think that those gaps are narrowing, and the kids can get a job at the movie theater, and those jobs are available. What I'm saying is the ascent to push your family into the next level is more challenging today than it was in 1970. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so good
and
thing
we
is,
disagree.
Yeah, we do disagree on that,
and that's okay.
I'd love to back it up. So I have one.
Sure.
I do have a final question. This was a good. We extend a little bit, but I have this final question, and this might take 5 minutes to work through. So I have family members that still are blue collar.
Mm-hmm.
Have a family member that works in a restaurant. My mom still lives in the old country house that I was born in. Literally, the one I was born in. Me and you, every day, when we go and fill up gas at the gas station,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't somebody have to work there?
Yes.
Okay. If we go to Frisch's next door
Mm-hmm.
and go through that drive-through, doesn't somebody have to make the food?
Sure.
Doesn't somebody have to ring us out?
Sure.
Isn't there someone that's sitting there serving the food?
Yep.
In our capitalistic society, that job just can't pay the same amount that a doctor does,
Yeah. I'm not arguing for that.
that a teacher does.
I'm not arguing for that. Yeah.
So here's my question. It's real. I got family members. Who's going to work those jobs? Well, imagine a society where there weren't choices.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone got paid the same amount to work regardless of whatever job. I don't want to.
That's socialism.
Okay, I don't want to work and
Yeah.
live in that world.
Yeah.
Right. Because I do believe the reason why these families don't have a lot of money, the way they get to have an iPhone
Yep.
or a Google phone,
Yep.
there is some trickle down stuff, man.
Sure.
There just is.
There's some trickle down.
There's
Yeah,
some.
Definitely.
And I know now also that there are resources and benefits for families that are poor now
Mm-hmm.
that were not there for my poor family in the 70s and 80s, man. There were some, but there were not the substantial level.
Well, you
So,
Go ahead.
So here's what I'm saying. If someone can't pay their water bill right now,
yeah.
there are resources, and I would raise my hand to help them make sure their water stays on. There are people, if they can't pay their utilities, there are governmental systems that even we participate in that we can put them engaged with me that make sure their power stays on. Dude, when I was growing up, if my family didn't pay the power bill, that son of a bitch was getting turned off. If we couldn't pay to put oil in our oil tank outside,
Yeah.
unless someone in our family member, our community literally cared about us to give us the cash, we didn't have heat.
Sure.
So those things are there now.
Well, it sounds like what you're saying is because there's a subsidy there that's available that people aren't falling through the cracks.
Nope, I'm saying it should even make it a little easier. Because
Sure.
that's what I'm saying, because that's they're taking 1 or 2 or 3 things away that they don't have to be worried about. Because I do know, man, if these kids didn't have food today, it's tough for them to go to school and focus on education.
Absolutely.
I know, but I know the schools provide that food now. They do.
They provide it at school.
No, to take home, man.
Some, yeah, not all.
Kenton County schools do.
Yes. Okay. So I have seen those bags, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen those bags.
Mm-hmm.
I've donated to those charities. It's helpful. It's helpful. What do we do in the summertime?
They get to go pick the food.
Some.
Anybody who
There's
needs,
not enough. So that's the point.
Here's what I'm telling you. I know this for a fact, and I know it for a fact, man. That if there's any kid in those schools that doesn't have enough food at home, they make sure they get food, man.
Okay. So what is your point?
My point is this, is that there are more community resources now for the families that for whatever reason haven't found it, able, capable, opportunities, whatever you wanted to say.
Sure.
Those gaps are filled, man. Way more than they were in the 70s and 80s.
Okay. And I would argue
Okay.
that keeping kids' bellies full
Important.
is the bare minimum
I agree.
for the United States,
Okay.
who has per capita GDP, it's either number one or number two.
It's
in
number
the
one
world,
still.
right?
Yep.
That's the bare minimum.
Yep.
And we do have kids who are hungry, and we do have an enormous homeless population, and we do have people who are falling through the cracks today. We do have that. So we have programs, and they're helping, but that does not say we don't have problems. We have problems. Those families exist, and we have to help them. And whether I'm a capitalist, you may not believe that. I'm 100% capitalist. And I said at the beginning of this, the reason I'm an entrepreneur, one of the main reasons is because I want to make money, right? I believe in capitalism, and we're going to have some of that. And what I've been arguing is that problem is at least just as pervasive today as it was in 1970.
I'm not going to disagree.
Okay. And so we have to do something about childcare, healthcare, all the cost of groceries, inflation generally. We have to do something about those things so that fewer people are going to the food pantry to feed their kids. We don't want people to do that, right?
But guess what? As long as the food pantry's there, I'm okay with it. You're saying I don't want anybody to go hungry.
Sure.
So I'm not making an argument that we shouldn't provide the basic necessities.
I know.
What
I
I'm
know.
saying is that provide those, and the rest is on you.
And what I'm saying is, ideally, we have fewer people going to the food pantry because they're going to Kroger and they're spending their money, and that is put back into
Because
the
they have a
economy.
job.
Because they have a job, or they have a job, and
Because if they don't have a job,
they have
they
a
don't-
job and upward mobility.
Yep.
Right.
I just
Yeah.
make arguments, and I think upward mobility is much more possible. I don't even think that's a word. There's a higher availability to have an upward mobility and move your family generation to generation up to the next level or next steps
Yeah.
than the bleeding hearts want to admit there is.
Yeah.
That's the pushback I have, and the funny thing is, people that really know me, and I care about these families.
Yeah, and maybe the difference in what we're talking about is I think there probably is more opportunity today to move your family from extreme poverty to low income scenarios. And I think maybe that's where we're talking past each other. I think there's less opportunity to move from low income to high income.
Oh, that's
what I think.
We probably wouldn't have a massive disagreement on that,
Yeah.
right? But the awesome thing is that I still have a path. See, that's some passion behind my company. It's not just for me. I've got a path to help people do it. So I think if there's a lot of people out here having this debate and getting involved in the community like I do, but you do it even a higher level, that is what can move the needle here.
Yeah.
Right. So whatever that looks like, man, I can't wait till the next conversation. So people are going to think I'm this mean old Grinch that doesn't care about people, but I just think I'm willing to push this conversation down the road to challenge these maybe idealistic, even if they're good or bad.
Yeah.
The idealistic perspectives these days to say, is it right
Yeah.
and why?
Well, and maybe the next time we talk, I would love to have, some stats in front of us, and then we can talk about it more specifically, because, we all have our own perspective on it, and we see the world through our own lens.
Yep.
And what's interesting to me about our differences is that we came from a similar background.
Isn't
and
that wild?
And we look at it in a different way. And that's why I love having this conversation. I love talking about it, and I think we got to have more of this conversation, not just here in this podcast studio, but at the state house level and at the federal level. And we need folks to be talking about this and thinking about this in a rational way and having a real conversation, even though we disagree.
Yeah, and to say, hey, are there some solutions here?
Yeah,
All
absolutely.
right, thanks, man. So give us entrepreneurs a message for the rest of 2023 from your HR, business operations minds. Give us the best piece of advice that Charlie Vance, because listen, guys, he does want your business. So can you operate in all the states? Like, what do you do? Is it just Kentucky? What?
You can operate in all the states if you have an employee on staff to manage it.
Okay.
Right?
So you can have customers
Yep.
and represent them from an HR solutions perspective in all the states?
Yep. If you want to have employees in all 50 states, we'll help you do it.
Look at you.
Absolutely.
So he wants your money. And if you think his bleeding heart is better for society than mine, then go to his website, go to his social media. So your LinkedIn, your Charlie Vance, and then I'm sure what's your website?
The website is getcurrenthr.com.
Man, that's easy.
Yep.
All these people who love you. Bleeding heart liberals, baby. They're coming to rescue him, guys.
Well, I'll take objection to bleeding heart liberal. I'm somewhere in the middle. Come on, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a capitalist. I just want to make sure we have a safety net. That's all.
That's awesome. Thanks for coming in, brother.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it.
Next time, maybe we come up with 8 topics.
Yep.
We both know what they are.
Yep.
We bring our stats.
Yeah, we bring our own stats.
And it'll be like WWE from the old days.
I love it.
Thanks, man.
All right, thanks.
Appreciate you. Yeah.